Senator McCain, things are obviously in considerable flux. It's difficult to know precisely what's happened, but there's clear evidence that there are at least reports of Russian trucks already in the Ukrainian province of Crimea and a warship moving backwards and forwards across the mouth of the harbour. What's your sense of what's happening now?
Well, I think it was predictable, and I predicted it. Vladimir Putin views Crimea especially as part of Russia. He views Ukraine that way as well, but especially valuable and important to him and his ambitions is the base at Sevastopol. And he has a majority Russian population there in Crimea, and they are taking the actions that are predictable, particularly since he views the United States as weak. He sees our failures in Syria, Iraq, Russian occupation of Georgia, and the list goes on. And I think he is emboldened by that, and he is going to take steps to try to ensure that Ukraine, particularly Crimea and probably eastern Ukraine, will remain part of Russia.
Well, I mean, you were in Kiev in December, and you made no secret of your very strong support for the European end of the country. But there is a difficulty in Crimea, isn't there? I mean, could it come to a point at which you actually have to consult the essentially Russian population down there and ask them whether they want to stay in Ukraine or go to Russia?
Well, I think you could do that, as you could ask a minority of citizens of any country whether they want to remain part of that country or not. But Crimea officially is part of Ukraine, and that is what is international boundaries. So if you start going around asking people if they want to be part of a country or not, depending on their views, that could obviously have serious consequences. Crimea is part of Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin is going to take steps to prevent the loss of Russian sovereignty over Crimea and, I believe, eastern Ukraine, and he'll do what's necessary to achieve that, and that is a violation of every international standard that I know of.
So what do you want the United States and the West, in a wider sense, to do about it?
First, condemn it. Second of all, look at various options, including, if absolutely necessary, economic sanctions. A larger Magnitsky Act, which is sanctions on individuals who may be responsible, because there will be violence there in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. There's a significant part of the population of Crimea that doesn't want to be part of Russia. And so there needs to be various actions taken, including, by the way, stepping up things like bringing Georgia into NATO and Moldova into the EU, and including one would be to reinvigorate our missile defense system that we removed when we made an agreement concerning that. And by the way, stop trying, maybe reset the reset button and not believe that we'll be, quote, more flexible, as the president promised Medvedev he would be if he was reelected with Vladimir.
The problem is, as you've already identified, there was the option to do something militarily in Syria, and that was rejected. And Mr. Putin's clearly read the American mood, and it is for non-intervention. And he can therefore presumably do whatever he likes. Because we can go to the United Nations, but he's got the power of a veto there.
Yeah, that's why I think that certain actions would have to be taken with our European allies and friends outside of the UN. Obviously, he would veto any measure, but we could think of sanctions. We could expand the Magnitsky Act. We could identify people who are in Ukraine right now. There are Russian troops in Ukraine, in Crimea, as we speak. So there's certain actions we can take that certainly we do not envision, and no one envisions, a military confrontation with Russia.
But what the Russians can be absolutely certain of is that the Americans are not going to do anything physically in terms of intervention into this crisis. Is that correct?
I think militarily he can be assured of that, but there are many measures. Again, economic sanctions, individual sanctions, universal condemnation, speaking out as Ronald Reagan did, bring down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev, speaking up for these people. There's a whole lot of range of options, diplomatic and economic, that we can exercise with our European allies if we are serious.
The difficulty is, and you know this very well, is that the economy of the Ukraine is literally days from complete meltdown. Why isn't the United States coming up with any money? Why isn't the United States getting together with other members of the Western Alliance to bring money into the equation?
You make a very good point. We are working on at least $1 billion package right away. I hope that we could get that done next week. You are exactly right. There is urgency. There's absolute urgency to getting economic assistance short-term and then a long-term IMF agreement in order to rescue the Ukrainian economy, which is literally on the brink of collapse. You're
but
exactly right.
a billion is peanuts compared with what they say they need. They're talking in terms of 35 billion.
Yes, but they need some short-term infusion, at least $1 billion here from the U.S., some money from Europeans. And by the way, maybe ask some of these oligarchs to give back some of the billions that they've made with this kleptocracy and corrupt government that they made so much money off of.
Are you sure that you'd be able to get a really big infusion of money through the Congress?
Yes. I believe that we could get $1 billion here, we could contribute to the IMF, we could work with the Europeans to try to get some more assistance. But justifiably, there's a short-term infusion that they need to just keep them afloat. But there has to be fundamental economic reforms, obviously, otherwise we're just going to be on this treadmill. So there has to be the economic reforms, which we're very familiar with because IMF has been negotiating with them for a long time.
And in terms of the crisis in Crimea itself, how much time do you think that anybody outside the country has to make their point?
I think in the short term you are going to see very likely a control of major transportation points in Crimea by either pro-Russian or Russian FSB, special operations people. I think it's going to be very difficult. I think you're going to see now also activity in eastern Ukraine as well. You have to understand that Vladimir Putin believes Ukraine and Crimea are part of Russia, and he is not going to go quietly into the night.
Finally, Senator, we've seen the former President Yanukovych talking there from Russia today. What pressure should be put on Russia to yield him up to the International Criminal Court or some equivalent?
Well, I hope we have more success than we had with Mr. Snowden. I think you've got to understand that. I think you've got to understand that Mr. Putin looks at United States actions around the world and draws appropriate conclusions. We're now announcing that maybe we'll get completely out of Afghanistan. Iraq is in chaos. We have done nothing literally to help those who are fighting in Syria. Russia continues to, with impunity, not only to occupy Georgia, but to move the boundaries of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Every place the United States of America is withdrawing. And again, the United States the President's statement the other day, a couple of days ago, well, this is not a Cold War chessboard. Well, to Mr. Putin, it is, because of his background, his experience, and his behavior, which he has exhibited in a number of ways.
Well, if you were talking to Mr. Obama, and given your length of history with the Cold War, what would you tell him in terms of how serious a crisis this is between East and West since the end of the Cold War?
I think that this is not a return to the Cold War to start with. This is not a return to the Cold War. We're not going to be on the brink of a nuclear exchange, et cetera. But what I would do, as I say, the president can speak out, we can galvanize the international community, we can pass sanctions, we can impose other economic penalties, we can accelerate countries like Georgia, Moldova, perhaps into both EU and to NATO. We can reinvigorate our missile defense capabilities in places like the Czech Republic. There's a wide range of options that we have, but by no means is it a return to the Cold War.
Senator McCain, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.